and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Archers when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on. I'm awash with this stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavour show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of...
Welcome to The Debate. Today, we're dissecting the anatomy of an apology. We are looking at a moment of incredibly high tension and moral complexity. George's return to Blossom Hill Cottage. After a tumultuous period defined by deception, cheating, and framing others for his own mistakes, George has walked voluntarily into the home of the people he hurt the most, the Aldridge family. This isn't just a casual visit, it is a formal, scheduled confrontation, facilitated by Alice, intended to be a reckoning.
A reckoning, or perhaps a carefully stage-managed piece of theater. I mean, you have a young man facing what is essentially a firing squad of his own making. Brian, Rory, and Kate. But notably absent is Adam. And the atmosphere in that room is less reconciliation and more, hostage negotiation.
That tension brings us right to the central question we're wrestling with today. Is George's decision to face the music, to take it on the chin, as he puts it, is that a necessary, noble act of courage that kickstarts the possibility of redemption? Or is this formal meeting a self-serving performance that places an unfair emotional burden on his victims before they're actually ready to hear him?
Well, I think the answer lies in the timing. I'm going to argue that this meeting is premature. It's narcissistic, and it's driven by George's inability to sit with his own guilt. He's trying to speed-run redemption.
And I take the position that this is the only way forward. George is demonstrating agency and a real willingness to be uncomfortable. You can't start a journey of change if you refuse to take the first step just because you're afraid of the terrain.
Okay, let's get into the evidence then.
Let's start with the motivation, the why behind this visit. Before he even steps foot in Blossom Hill, he has a pretty revealing conversation with Susan. He tells her explicitly, "If I want stuff to change, I have to make it happen." Now, to me, this signals a massive psychological shift. For months, George has operated with an external locus of control, blaming circumstances, blaming alcohol, blaming other people. Here, he is shifting to an internal one. He knows he is walking into a hostile environment. He knows, as Susan points out, that Brian might tear a strip off him, yet he goes. He shows up at 6 o'clock sharp. That requires a level of bravery we shouldn't just dismiss.
I'm not dismissing the effort, but I am questioning the engine driving it. You're quoting the part where he sounds proactive. I'm looking at the part where he reveals the emotional reality. He tells Alice, "The hurry is that I'm sick of myself and all the bad vibes." That is a very telling admission. He isn't rushing to Blossom Hill because he's had some profound realization about the pain he caused Rory or the terror he inflicted on the family with that whole fabricated attack. He is rushing because he feels bad. He wants to exfoliate the guilt because it's uncomfortable for him.
But isn't that how a conscience works? I mean, discomfort is the signal that you've done something wrong. The fact that he is sick of himself is actually a positive indicator. It means his conscience is functioning. If he were comfortable, then he'd be a sociopath. He wants the bad vibes to stop, which means he wants to stop being the person who causes them.
There's a difference between remorse and shame, though. Remorse is about the other person. Shame is about yourself. This entire setup, it just reeks of shame management. Look at the timing. Alice organizes this civilized framework where people take turns speaking, but it feels incredibly forced. He is imposing his timeline on them. He wants the bad vibes gone now, so the Aldridges have to sit on their sofa and listen to him now.
I disagree that it's an imposition, and primarily because Alice, a member of that family, orchestrated it. She believes this structure is necessary. And frankly, the structure, taking turns, no interrupting, it provides a container for emotions that could otherwise just turn into a brawl. George is submitting himself to this. He isn't demanding forgiveness. He says, "I'm going to say I'm sorry and then listen to whatever they have to say back to me." That is the definition of humility. He's offering himself up for judgment.
Offering himself up or performing submission? See, true humility would be respecting the victim's need for space. Look at Adam. Adam didn't come. He used an excuse about his son Xander dealing with bullying at school, calling it a feeble excuse, but everyone in that room knew the truth. Adam couldn't be there because his blood just boils when it comes to George. By forcing this meeting, George and Alice, for that matter, are essentially saying, your healing process needs to happen on our schedule.
I think Adam's absence actually proves the value of the meeting for those who did attend. It acted as a filter. Those who absolutely couldn't face him stayed away. But for Brian, Kate, and Rory, they chose to be there, however reluctantly. And we have to talk about Susan's defense of George here. She pleads with Brian to remember that George is only 20 years old. She asks Brian to remember what he was like at that age, full of himself, selfish. The argument is that young people are malleable. If you shut the door on them completely, you guarantee they never change. If you open it a crack, even with skepticism, you allow for growth.
The problem with Susan's argument is that she's asking for hope, but Brian rightly identifies that what she's actually asking for feels a lot like blind faith. And I think this brings us to the core of the debate, the nature of trust versus the nature of naive optimism.
Which is our first major point of contention. Susan explicitly states it's not blind faith. She says, I believe in encouraging someone when they're trying to change. She's asking for a chance, not a pardon.
And Brian, to his credit, offers the most grounded, realistic take in the entire episode. He tells George, if this apology is sincere, well, then I'll work towards accepting it. But he adds a massive caveat. He says change requires a hell of a lot of willpower. Brian isn't buying the performance, he's buying the possibility, but he's charging a very high price for it. He knows that words in a living room are cheap.
I think you're underestimating the significance of Brian's concession, though. This is Brian Aldridge. He is not a man who suffers fools. He is stubborn, he is principled, and he holds a grudge like it's a family heirloom. For him to say he will work towards accepting it, that is a massive victory for George's approach. It proves that showing up matters. If George had stayed hiding in the shop, stocking stuffing and gravy, Brian would have just stewed in his resentment. The face-to-face interaction, the vulnerability of George sitting there while they critique him, that is what softened Brian's edge, even slightly.
Softened, or just made Brian polite because he was in a room with ladies present. Look at Rory. Rory is the litmus test here. Rory refuses to shake his hand. Rory says, I hear free pass. When George apologizes, Rory hears a demand for absolution.
Introducing the Archer's mug, where elegance meets everyday comfort. Crafted from premium white ceramic, designed with vibrant peekaboo colors inside, simple, modern, and stylish. Start your day the Archer's way, with warmth, familiarity, and the comfort of voices you've come to love. As the stories unfold on the Archers, let this mug become part of your daily ritual, a small reminder of life in Ambridge. Practical for every home, dishwasher and microwave safe. Available in 2 sizes, 11 ounces and 15 ounces, designed to fit your lifestyle. Enjoy your favorite drink in a mug that connects you to Britain's most beloved countryside story, The Archers. For more information and to order your very own The Archers mug, follow the link below and make it part of your daily routine.
This is what I mean about the meeting being premature. George says the words, I am sorry from the bottom of my heart, and Rory's reaction is effectively, so what? The wound is too fresh. The breach of trust, the lying, the cheating, the sheer manipulation, it cannot be patched over with a scheduled 6 p.m. appointment.
But Rory's reaction doesn't mean the meeting failed. It means the meeting was honest. George needed to hear that. He needed to see Rory refuse his hand. He needed to hear that sorry isn't a magic word. That is part of the taking it on the chin that George promised to do. If everyone had just politely shaken hands and moved on, George would have learned nothing. The hostility is the lesson. He needed to feel the weight of the wall he built.
But George interprets the hostility as unfairness, which, we'll get to later. But first, we have to address the Freddie comparison. For those who don't know the history, Kate brings up Freddie, a man who went to prison for a very serious crime and eventually changed his life. Kate makes a crucial distinction here. She can forgive the changed man, but she couldn't forgive the man who committed the act. And she challenges George, Do you think I felt like that the week Freddie was released? The answer is no. She is highlighting that George is asking for the changed man treatment while he is still effectively the man who committed the crime. He hasn't put in the time yet.
And that is a fair critique from Kate. It absolutely is. But you have to start the clock somewhere. You can't become the changed man 5 years from now if you don't start day one today. This meeting is day one. It is the planting of the flag. George is acknowledging publicly, I am at the starting line of earning back your trust. You can't skip to the finish line, but you also can't refuse to start the race.
I come at it from a different way. I think he believes he's at the finish line. He thinks the apology is the transaction that clears the debt. And nothing illustrates his lack of understanding better than his attempt at empathy regarding Alice.
This is a critical moment in the dialogue. George, sensing the intensity of their protection over Alice, says, if anyone hurt Kira or Poppy, I'd kill them. Now, on the surface, this is violent imagery, sure. But purely emotionally, he's trying to use the only framework he understands, his love for his own family, his sister and niece, to show he grasps the gravity of what he did to theirs. He's trying to say, I get it, I feel that protective instinct too.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that as empathy. In fact, I think that was the single most damning moment of the entire confrontation. Kate dissects it surgically. She asks, why do men always say that? Why do they have to imagine whatever dreadful act is happening to their wife, their sister, or their daughter before they can take it seriously?
It's a sharp critique, I grant you.
It's more than sharp, it's devastating. It exposes that George lacks true empathy. True empathy is looking at Alice and understanding her pain as Alice. George has to rely on what psychologists call vicarious empathy. He can only understand the pain if he simulates it happening to his people, to Kira or Poppy. He has to center himself, his family, his potential loss to feel anything. It just proves Kate's accusation. I don't think you understand anything apart from yourself, what you want, what you need.
I think that's a very harsh reading of a 20-year-old boy struggling to articulate remorse in a high-pressure environment. He's reaching for a metaphor. I mean, he's drowning in that room, and he grabs the only life raft he sees, which is his love for his own family. Is it clumsy? Yes. Is it male-centric? Absolutely, and Kate is right to call it out. But does it prove he's a narcissist? I'm not convinced. He is trying to bridge the gap. He is saying, I know I am the villain here, and I know why you hate me, because I would hate me too. That is a form of empathy, even if it's an imperfect one.
But look at his reaction when Kate pushes him. When Kate lists the people he has snapped at, Lillian, Fallon, Kenton, George interrupts. He gets defensive. He says, not rage, anger. I'll get angry. He is splitting hairs about definitions, while he is supposed to be apologizing for destroying their trust. That is not the behavior of someone who is taking it on the chin. That is the behavior of someone protecting their ego. He is debating semantics while the house is burning down.
Or it's the behavior of someone who values precision because he's terrified of being misunderstood. He is distinguishing between uncontrollable rage, which implies he is dangerous, and justifiable anger. But I admit, in that moment, he risked losing the room. However, Alice steps in. She moderates. And this brings us to the outcome. We have to look at the result. The meeting ended. No one was punched. No one screamed. George brought the Tupperware container back to Nana Susan. In the grand scheme of conflict resolution, the fact that this event occurred without violence or total meltdown, that is a success.
The bar is on the floor if nobody punched him is our metric for success.
In this context, with the betrayal this deep, yes, it is a success. The metric for success is that the ice is broken. As Susan says later, he held out an olive branch. Alice seemed to believe him. Brian agreed to work towards acceptance. Those are tangible shifts in the geopolitical landscape of Ambridge. If he hadn't gone, the ice would still be frozen solid. He forced a thaw.
But let's look at George's immediate takeaway. This is where the mask slips completely. He gets back to Susan, eats his sausage and mash, and he complains. He says it was okay, but it wasn't great. He whines that they treated him like scum.
He's venting to his grandmother. He just sat through an emotional firing squad. He's allowed to feel battered. It was an exhausting experience.
He's allowed to feel battered, but his complaint reveals his expectation. He engaged in what we might call transactional forgiveness. He expected to put the sorry coin in the vending machine and get the forgiveness product out. When he didn't get immediate warmth, when Rory remained hostile and Brian remained skeptical, George felt cheated. He says, "What can I do?" As if he's helpless. Susan has to school him. She has to tell him there's no one in the world can control the behavior and reactions of others.
And that is the wisdom of the elder generation. Susan is right. But I interpret George's frustration differently. He isn't mad that he didn't get away with it. He's discouraged because the road ahead is harder than he thought. He admits to Alice earlier, "I'm sick of myself." He wants the redemption to start now. His frustration is that of a young man realizing that actions have long-term consequences. It's a painful lesson, but he is learning it. He didn't storm out of the meeting. He stayed until Alice called time. He listened to Kate compare him to a criminal. He sat there. That counts.
It counts for something, sure, but it confirms that he is still centering his own narrative. He isn't thinking, "Wow, I really hurt Rory. I hope Rory is okay." He's thinking, "Rory was mean to me and that feels unfair." That is a profound lack of maturity. He is still the protagonist of his own movie, and the Aldridges are just supporting characters who aren't reading your lines correctly.
I see why you think that, but I believe you are demanding a level of Zen-like enlightenment from a 20-year-old that is just unrealistic. Of course he centers himself. He's the one in the hot seat. But let's look at the alternative. If he hadn't gone, if he had listened to the fear, he would be further away from redemption than he is now. By facing them, he has stripped away the mystery. They know where he stands, he knows where they stand. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's real.
It's real, I'll give you that. It was a stress test for reality, and I think the reality is that the damage is far deeper than George realized. The meeting exposed that while George wants to move fast, early bird catches the worm, as he said about the Valentine's chocolates he was trying to sell, reconciliation is a slow, grinding process. He tried to retail his apology like he sells chocolates, hoping for a quick sale, but the Aldridges aren't buying it yet.
But he is still standing at the counter, so to speak. And that's my closing argument. George took a tangible step away from the person he was. He walked into the fire. Was he perfect? No. Was he defensive at times? Yes. But as Susan noted, he is trying to change. He respected the structure Alice set up. He didn't lash out at Rory. He accepted the terms. That is the anatomy of an apology. It's not about doing it perfectly. It's about doing it even when you know it won't be enough.
And my closing thought is this. The meeting highlighted the massive distance left to travel. George's frustration that they didn't immediately trust him shows he still prioritizes his own comfort over their healing. The absence of Adam and the hostility of Rory show that reconciliation happens on the victim's timeline, not the offender's. George forced a confrontation to clear his own bad vibes, and he learned that you can't schedule forgiveness like a dentist appointment.
It's a classic conflict, isn't it? Between the desire for redemption and the need for retribution. The listener will have to decide if they saw a young man growing up or a narcissist putting on a show.
Or perhaps the difference between performative regret and actual penance.
The silence has been broken at Blossom Hill, and for better or worse, George has made his move. That's all for this edition of The Debate. Thank you for listening.
Until next time.
So, what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just moving mics around.
So, what do you do?
I'll do the spot effects on the archers. Any
Are you what we call Foley then?
Kind of. Yep.
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production.
Yep. That's the ball bar. That's
this one.
Yep. That's.
Haley so wanted to be in their own place when their baby came. It's due in 2 months. Not much chance of that now. No. I mean, it would have been a stretch for them financially, mind, but I just wish there was something practical I could do to help them, Caroline. I think The Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community, whatever